All right, welcome. This has been a long time coming. We've been talking about it. We've been planning it. It is the great crossover draft, Michigan State. This is going to be fascinating. I'm excited to do this. I don't know where this is going to go, but it'll definitely be interesting. Real quick rundown. Our first overall pick will be tonight, David Klein of Spartan Hoops. David, what's up? Thanks for coming, man. And Chris Castellani, Barstool Sports, with that second overall pick. Who I'm fascinated to see where he goes. I know where DK is going to go, but good to have you, Chris. Anthony Broome, the Wolverine, the other Wolverine in the group. Welcome, Anthony. And, of course, yours truly. I'm going to break down the rules really quick. The audience may not know. The three other people in the room do. So we are drafting 8 players, snake draft style, in the order that you kind of see on your screen. So we're going to snake through. Every Michigan and Michigan State basketball player from 2007, 2008 season to present day is eligible. We picked that because that was year one of the John Beilein era. So anybody that played in that year to the current present day is eligible. You get each player you take at the peak of their powers in college. So if I take, for example, Adrian Payne, rest in peace, I would be getting the senior year incredible version, not sort of the average, of his 4 years in total. We are drafting for a hypothetical Final Four. So we are going to be in a Final Four against the other 3 teams. So we're trying to beat them. And the key point, I think, more than anything, is that we are building a team. This is not simply a best players list. So, again, we're taking 8 guys. With my 8th pick, I'm not going to necessarily say this is the best basketball player in a vacuum on the board. I'm saying that 8th guy is the best guy that finishes out my team, that rounds out what I need. If I'm lacking a big guy, there might be a point guard that's better, but I need a big guy. So just keep that in mind. So when this list is posted and you see somebody, how did this guy go before that guy? I'm trying to build a team. These guys are trying to build a team. So this is not a straight best players list. It's 4 guys building a team. And for those that did ask, and this was somehow the most frequently asked question, the draft order was randomly selected. I don't know why that question kept coming up, but that was a thing. So DK, you did draw the first overall pick, and then it'll be about half an hour before you're seen again. There is the draft order. I don't know if this is going to be kind of really talkative, like more at the beginning, or I feel like you could have riveting conversations like with the last 2 or 3 picks and like, who are we not drafting in this thing? This will be interesting though. I argued that you could make a legitimate argument for 4 different guys going first overall. I'm fascinated to see where you go. Yeah. DK, kick us off, man. You're up.
Okay, so let me start out by saying this is an unfortunate pick. I would much rather had anything else across the board. I just think it's a very difficult position to be in. I obviously get to pick one of the 2 best point guards to come through the programs in the last 25 years, really. So there's a privilege to being able to make this pick, but it also was a difficult one. I looked at this 2 ways sideways. I looked at all the numbers. Cash's junior year and Trey's sophomore year were really extremely similar across the board. Cash ends up averaging a little bit more, a couple more, like about 1 more assist, a little less than that. But basically the numbers across the board were pretty similar. Ultimately, the decision that I made to go with Cassius Winston, who's my first pick, was done just in the larger example of, for starters, I wrote a whole website about Spartan Hoops. So if I chose a Michigan player number 1 overall, I don't think I'd ever live that down. But 2, this is a rivalry draft. And if we're looking at a single year in the rivalry, I think you can make the argument that Cassius has the best, maybe of any on the board. He beat Michigan 3 times in 21 days, once for a Big Ten regular season championship, once for a Big Ten tourney championship.
I remember.
Yeah, I believe it. I was at the Chicago game, the Big Ten tourney that came back. Absolutely unbelievable. And ultimately, obviously, Burke made it to a national title game. He made it a little further. He gets sprung into the NBA. Maybe we're having a different conversation. It's always difficult to compare a 2-year player versus a 4-year player. But if there's one guy that I want to put my money on in crunch time in the Final Four, I'm going to lean on Cash. So I went with Cash on this one.
I thought you were going to go Burke. I got to admit, and the argument for Trey Burke first overall would be neither one was a great defender. They didn't make all Big Ten defense or anything like that. But Trey Burke, I would argue, was a better defender. Mm-hmm. and Trey Burke at his peak was a first-team All-American, Cassius a second. There's no wrong answer. I would just say that was the argument. I think
he won the Naismith. I mean, Burke won the Naismith that year. He won the greatest award that you can do in college basketball. So it was a difficult decision for me on that. I guess the one argument that I would make is in the best season that Cash had, we didn't get to see the fourth, so we never know if maybe that legacy changes a little bit, but we didn't get to see Burke's either. I just look at what's around him versus what was on it. Like Burke had a very good team. It was young. It was a very young team. There was 4 other first-round draft picks, and Glenn Robinson went 40, so like a pretty early second on that team. So probably maybe the most talented team Michigan's had maybe in the last 20 years. I'll let Chris maybe speak more to that. But if you look at what Cash dragged to the Final Four, Kenny Goins, Xavier Tillman, a freshman Aaron Henry, like there was Matt Mcquaid, like not as much talent at a high level. The pieces all fit and he made it all work. So that was part of my argument with it too. But I think you could have gone either way, and I don't think there's really a wrong answer on this. But that's the one I got to choose my Spartan dog. I could not do it.
Cassius Winston goes first overall. The happiest man in the room. It's Chris Castellani. Over his shoulder is a picture of the man. I don't want to be presumptuous. Where are we going with the second overall pick, Chris?
You are welcome to be incredibly presumptuous, because this would have been the most embarrassing shit if I was taking Cassius Winston with my first pick with a fucking 20-inch Trey Burke.
It worked out well for both of us, Chris.
Exactly. No, I was happy. And look, you can't go wrong either way, for the record. I mean, if you would have taken Burke, I was taking Cash. But the fact is, look, these are two, I mean, maybe not since 2008, but at least over the last decade, dynamite programs. And there's only one guy who's been National Player of the Year. And it's the guy behind me. Even beyond, what he did for the program, we're just talking individuals here. One of my big criteria for this draft, especially because we're talking about these teams would presumably be playing each other in a Final Four situation. One of my big things is, does he have some dog in him? Is he a guy who has that mental toughness? Cash did. We know a lot of these guys have had that. That's how they were able to be so successful throughout their college careers. And you brought it up, Justin. I think one of the issues that the early Beeline teams had was they were not particularly sound defensively. Burke was a better defender than people let on. You said it a minute ago. Obviously, I'm not saying he was amazing. People remember the play off of Keith Appling at Chrysler Center, but he had plays like that all year. And I think that if we're talking mental toughness in a big game scenario, we go back to the Kansas game, obviously. We go back to some of the big games that he had throughout, his tenure there. There is obviously a personal bias, but at the same time, National Player of the Year. Like, I don't think I'm completely, you can't totally call favoritism here. He is one of the more influential players in the history of Michigan basketball. Should have his number retired at Chrysler Center, but that's a conversation for another day. Trey Burke, my number 1 pick.
Yeah, can't argue. In some order, that would have been my first 2. I can't wait for the first pick I can actually make fun of. We're not there yet. Maybe Anthony will get me going here.
Jeez.
Way to tee me up. I appreciate that.
Yeah, Anthony Ianni is trying to get drafted tonight, so now's the time to take him if you want to take a friend of the show, Anthony Ianni, Michigan State Center. Who are you taking third overall, Anthony? Who we got?
This is tough because not only are you looking for, in a draft like this, you're looking for, like, DK gets best Spartan on the board, Chris gets best Wolverine on the board. You're looking for not only someone who's like the best player, you're looking for someone who is the Energizer Bunny behind those type of deep runs. So when I look at the criteria for this first pick, like, and DK, shout out to you, did a wonderful job putting this sheet together with stats and.
We got to give a shout out to Ben. He put all the stats on it. I just put the wheels in motion there.
Okay, well, shout out to Ben, the man behind the curtain, for all he does. So for me, it's where can I find the best mix of guys that have been there and guys who are kind of towards the top of this list. And it comes down to 2 players for me. And this is where it's sort of, I guess we're kind of breaking type here. I mean, it's gone, the Spartan guy took the Spartan, the Wolverine guy took the Wolverine. I'm not popular in my own fan base anyways, so I'm going to break form here. I'm going to go with Draymond Green here, a guy who
all right,
kind of, like I said, talk Energizer Bunny, 3-time Big Ten champion, won a Big Ten tournament, went to 2 Final Fours, Big Ten Player of the Year, I think somewhere here.
Justin's already scrambling. He thought you were going somewhere else. He thought you were going Denzel. He immediately looked to his screen to see where he's going with his next two.
I had his jersey printed. We're screwed now. Yeah, we're in trouble. I thought it was mine.
Yeah, it was between him, Denzel Valentine, Nick Stauskas were the other guys right at the top there that I was looking at. But again, you're looking for someone who's going to be that driving force that's going to will you, that's going to drag you kicking and screaming to a Final Four. Draymond Green is that guy. And his numbers in the rafters at Breslin, was an All-American, National Player of the Year 2012, obviously went on to have a successful NBA career after that. That doesn't matter here, but that's my guy right now. That's who I'm building this team around, and we'll fill in the other pieces from there. And I like that we talked about positional versatility before we started this. I can play him at the 3, I can play him at the 4, I can play him at the 5. So it kind of leaves me open to do whatever I want here, depending on how the board breaks out.
You can play him at the 1 a little bit.
Small amount of consideration to pick him number 1. I did think about that just to flip the board on its head.
There is a case. I mean, there's a case. I think he is the highest IQ defensive player I've ever seen at any level. I mean, we excluded any NBA considerations, for this list, so his NBA career is irrelevant. But even just keeping it to college, he is, I think, easily the best defensive player in this pool. Mm-hmm. And as a college player, was putting up 16, 17 a game at his peak. And, Anthony said I could put him 3, 4, 5. There were times he was bringing the ball up the court for Michigan State, running the offense for 7, 8 minutes at a time. I mean, he can do anything. He's a Swiss Army knife at the college level. Obviously, he's not going to back down from anybody, whether you love him or hate him. Great pick. I thought he was mine. I'll get to mine. There are in this draft, or there were going in, 3 first-team All-Americans. The first 2 just went, Trey Burke and Draymond Green. I have to take with the 4th pick, the last one remaining on that first team. Denzel Valentine will be my 4th overall pick, first pick on my team. And I think Denzel's an interesting study. He did win National Player of the Year, but it wasn't the same one, the Naismith. I
think it was AP or something, wasn't it?
That was AP, but Buddy Hield took the
Naismith,
what is considered the sexier award, the Naismith. Whatever you think, that was kind of a coin flip. It was, I think the vote was like the closest it had ever been. They kind of each won, one won the coaches poll, one won the media poll, whatever you want to say. So he did win a National Player of the Year award, and he's the last one we can say that about that's available. First team All-American. I would argue this is the one that I really wanted to talk about from a legacy standpoint with you guys, because I'm curious if you agree. I would argue Denzel Valentine had the most legacy damaging loss of anybody in the history of the Michigan State program. The Michigan equivalent would be, I think, obviously Chris Webber. I'm not as educated on the Michigan side. Maybe I'm forgetting something, obviously, with the infamous timeout. But the loss to Middle Tennessee State took Denzel Valentine from potentially being the first overall pick in a draft like this to where it's 4th overall. And even now, I feel like I have to defend it at 4th. Again, National Player of the Year, first team All-American, could do everything. I mean, you see the numbers, 44.5% from 3.
I didn't know he didn't win a big regular season title, though. Dang. I did not know that.
Yeah, that is a negative.
That hurts a little bit too.
The Big Ten was also stacked in some of those years. 13, 14, that was a loaded Big Ten, and they were in there.
You're right. I think it is mitigated by the 2 tournament wins, and I think it's also mitigated by the fact that he was the second best player on a Final Four team that overachieved, and he was a big part of that. Yeah. So, that is mitigated. But anytime you're talking about a guy who on a major award list won, he was the best player in the country for a season. I mean, that's what, two guys on this list. There's only 3 first-team All-Americans. I think the loss to Middle Tennessee State really damaged this guy's legacy. He didn't need to win a national title, although it would have helped. But even if they had gotten to the Elite 8 or certainly a second Final Four, I think he's remembered so much differently. DK, you're more like
couldn't agree more. I mean, it's devastating. It's the biggest black eye in tournament history, really, for Izzo. And that was a team that coming in, I thought could win the whole thing. They just had all the pieces. It was one of his best shooting teams. I mean, I think he and Bryn Forbes both shot like above 45% from deep on super volume. Like, one of the most fun teams just aesthetically that Michigan State's ever had, and to just basically just get waxed in that game. It wasn't like a close loss, like heartbreaking. Like they came out and got punched in the mouth, and that definitely should have been a quicker timeout. I think we all agree about that, but they looked shell shocked and they didn't recover. And it's just tough when we're looking at like overall legacy of a player to go out like that after the season that he had. It's unfortunate, but I agree with you. I think it's partially tainted just the longer and bigger picture with him.
I think it wasn't just that he lost, because you see these upsets happen, but the star player plays pretty well and everything out. The other team just shot the lights out. He was so bad in that game. There was a sequence where they had like 6 possessions and he had 3 missed shots and 3 turnovers in the first. Like it was just, he was completely falling apart. And the way that game really got away was in the second half of that game with like 8 or 10 minutes left. They showed him on the sideline coming like to the sideline after a timeout, or right after timeout, and he's just like punching the chair, punching the ground. He was completely flustered, and they were down like 4 or 5 at that point. Like you got a ton of time left. You got a lot more talent. And that was the first time in that game where I said, oh shit, we're in trouble. For 32 minutes, I was like, we'll figure it out. We'll be fine. We'll be fine. We'll be fine. And then when I saw him melt down, he had kind of a fit on the sideline. I said, if this is your star, like we're dead. And we were dead. So I this is a hell of a way to go for me justifying my picking of him. but you have to look at, I think you could make an argument that he had the best year of anybody on this list, and his peak was the highest peak. It just had a very bad final chapter. But
speaking to Anthony's point, the positional flexibility. Now he's 6'5", right? So you can put anybody you want next to him, and you can put another point guard, you can put a wing. Like it gives you a ton of flexibility, and that's a nice position too.
I'll tell you. So for my 5th pick, I didn't think I would have to make this decision. This is very hard for me. I don't want to. I'm between 2.
It's really not hard. This should be an easy decision. I saw Chris's face, and I agree with it.
I know who Chris wants me to take. I'm going to make the pick. I hope that somehow you guys forget about the other guy I want. This is me biting my tongue. I got to take Nick Stauskas with my 5th overall.
God damn it!
Damn it!
I have to. I'll just tell you, this isn't a real draft where we're competing for money. I'll tell you, for me, I don't care who else you guys were thinking. To me, it was between Kalen Lucas and Nick Stauskas. Kalen Lucas, I think, and we could talk about it whenever he goes off the board more, I think he's one of the most underrated players. He's so underappreciated. It's like we forgot that this guy was the best player in the conference for a year. He was crowned the best player in the conference, was the best player on a national championship runner-up, was the best player on the team that could have won had he not gone down, and went to the Final Four anyway without him. I mean, if you're the best player on a team that made it to the national title game and then went to the Final Four the next year, that's a hell of a resume. But that aside, Stauskas, I mean, here's the case. We've exhausted all of the first team All-Americans. So this guy is now we're into the second team now at this point, but Stauskas, second team All-American, one of the best shooters I've ever seen in this rivalry, a guy that I felt shot 78% whenever we played him from 3. I'm sure that's not the actual stat, but it sure felt that way.
It's around there. Yeah.
If he was open, like just get back on defense, Michigan, because it's always, he never missed an open shot against us. And if it was contested, he shot only about like 60%. Just a lethal guy, and I gotta think Denzel's going to be finding that guy. He'll have a little bit of that same thing with that he had with Bryn Forbes on my team, but Stauskas is a better version of Bryn Forbes, I would argue, certainly at the college level. Just an incredible resume. I believe he did win a Big Ten Player of the Year at some point.
He did, yeah. This was a no-brainer pick, by the way. This was clearly the next pick for sure.
Yeah, good. I'm glad.
He also won Big Ten Player of the Year in one of the best Big Tens ever. You had Frank Kaminsky, Sam Decker, Adrian Payne, Gary Harris, Yogi Ferrell, Noah Vonleh, all in that Big Ten, with a Wisconsin team that made it to the Final Four, a Michigan State team that made it to the Elite Eight. And he was the guy that year. So yeah, I gotta commend you for that pick. That's a really good pick.
Yeah, and my hesitation was not because I don't think Stauskas is great. I think it's hard to pass out a Big Ten Player of the Year that was the best player on 2 Final Four teams. But That went to my school, but to me, Stauskas is the pick, and Denzel can do a lot of ball handling for my team. I didn't need 2 primary ball handlers, so I'm going with the best shooter on the entire board and the entire pool is Nick Stauskas. That puts it back on you, Anthony. Who you got?
Well, for all the reasons that you already laid out, I mean, to keep it moving here, Kalen Lucas is the pick. It was going to be between Stauskas and Lucas for that next pick for me. I need a point guard, and looking at the best point guards on the board, you would have, from my fan base's perspective, was looking at maybe a Michigan guy to throw in there just to mix it up. But I'm going to double down with Spartans here. I'm trying to win this thing. Now I have my first 2 picks. I have 4 combined Final Four appearances, 2 guys that were respectively the best players on their team when they made those runs to the Final Four. So it's Kalen Lucas. Plenty of picks left to add some Wolverine flavor to the roster, but I'm going pedigree here. Pedigree over allegiance, and I'm trying to win this draft. So that's my pick there.
Last thing on Kalen Lucas. If I have to have the ball in one guy's hands in this entire draft on the Michigan State side, not for one wide open 3. I'm talking about ball in his hand, dribbling at the top. He's got to make a play. I got to think Kalen Lucas might be my first pick on the whole entire Michigan State side. So many Black Mamba, Kobe type moments against Michigan 2 times. I just had so much confidence that he would get it done. Had a clutch shot against Kansas in the NCAA tournament. I don't know if DK thinks I'm crazy, but in this pool, like, I got to have someone dribbling at the top of the key, 8 seconds left. I'm down 1 or 2. That'd be my first pick in the whole draft. And I think that matters for this type of thing.
It's back to me now, right?
Yep. We're on you,
yes,
Chris.
Sir.
This is a tough one. I'm choosing between 2 people. I'm not going to say who, because, I want to keep my cards close to the Trey Burke was an amazing, amazing player at Michigan. But Trey Burke thrived the most in that tournament run to the national championship. And this is not the guy I'm going with, for the record. But he thrived when a big man finally emerged in Mitch Mcgarry. So I think that a 1-2 punch between Burke, a ball handling, 3-point shooting, score first point guard, with a big man who is versatile. We talk about position versatility, who can shoot threes, drive the basket, was, I believe, 2nd team all conference, never an All-American, but had some dog in him, played in a national championship. I'm not exclusively going to go Michigan people here, I promise. But I'm going Mo Wagner with my second pick.
There it is.
It's I'm not going to say who I'm choosing between with that pick, but I would say, despite playing in the national championship, when you look at his development as a player and what he was, we've all talked about this. I don't think that 2018 Michigan team was even close in terms of talent to what the 2013 team was. But what you had was an automatic go-to guy in Wagner that created a matchup nightmare. And twice, I think that this is why this pick will hold against a Michigan State team that had size, that had athleticism. They couldn't take him twice. I mean, he had a game in Breslin that was one of the best individual performances I've seen at that arena by a road athlete, going for 27, obviously famous, put Nick Ward on ice skates. But even beyond that, in the Big Ten tournament, after a bad first half, played an incredible second half and ultimately went on to win Big Ten tournament, most outstanding player. Mo Wagner is my second pick. Love the guy. There were a lot of people I was choosing between here, but I just feel like the matchup, the comparison with him and Burke, I feel like they go really, really well together, especially in kind of the modern age of basketball where you need shooters, you need scorers. So I'm going Mo.
Yeah, I think the best part of his legacy is that he was the one that started the tall-ish white Michigan basketball players that taunt fans at the Breslin Center.
Over Stauskas? You see, I thought Stauskas was the guy who started. He wasn't the big man, but Stauskas was, and I love Stauskas.
Yeah.
Stauskas was the first, I'm gonna psychologically give you the finger.
That's probably fair. Why do you always have an annoying white guy that hates our fans? Brizdakis came. I actually liked Iggy, even though he was winless against us.
Yeah.
Now it's Dickinson taunting Izzo.
Yeah.
I don't know who. I feel like you get better recruit one to replace Dickinson. I don't think you have one on the current roster when he leaves, but Yeah, Wagner was one of those guys. Everyone hated him, but you knew he was good. He was a pain in the ass to play against. You mentioned the 27 points. That Michigan State team was ranked 5th. Like, they were expected to win that game.
Yeah.
And he just he dunked on him for 2 hours. So, I can't argue with the pick.
In terms of annoying white guy, keep an eye on Will Cheddar like 2 years from now.
I was just about to say that, man. He's going to be the next. He's the apprentice. He's the Darth Vader of this upcoming. Like, you got the Emperor in the wings. He's coming. I feel like in the next 2 years. That's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah, man. You always have one in the wings. I'm telling you.
Yeah.
So, all right. I think what was that? What are we on? DK now? Is that
We're back to 8-9, so I get to pick around here. This is kind of crazy. I did not think that this was going to be a possibility. I was like, I hope one of these guys is here. And like, I'm just looking at the board still. I don't know if I can go away from it. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to take Gary Harris and Miles Bridges, because the two of them next to Cash together would be just insane. I mean, Gary Harris obviously provides some protection, excellent defender, a kid that I just think he embodied everything about the program when he played. He played the right way. I think he's a perfect fit next to Cash. I think ideally you want somebody who's a little bit more defensive minded, but a guy who can score at all 3 levels. Let me see the career wise here. I had it somewhere. Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah. So his best season, I mean, a really nice run. Again, he didn't end up making the Final Four, but that Elite 8 right there. I'm a big fan of Gary Harris. I thought he was a dog in college. And then you combine it with Miles Bridges, who may be the most athletic pound-for-pound player in this entire draft. The ability to be able to play him at the 3 or the 4, depending on kind of how the board fills out. I would say maybe the one knock on him is just his 2 years. Michigan State really didn't win anything. I know they won a Big Ten championship. It was a little bit of a watered-down year that year. I think there was only 4 teams that made the tournament, and I want to say that out of the 3 other top teams, they only beat Purdue once on that step-back shot he hit in the Breslin. So that was a situation where it didn't go exactly kind of how he wanted it to, but I don't think it was 100% his fault. I just think that maybe some of the roster constructions weren't 100% perfect for what he is. And I think that, again, just the ability for a guy to shoot almost 40% from deep and also basically jump over you at the rim. I just really like the combination of those two next to Cash.
Yeah, the best argument for Bridges, I think, is he is one of the maybe the most talented guy in the whole draft. Certainly like top 3. I think he was always miscast as a first banana mentally, not like in terms of ability. I don't think he really wanted that. He did the best he could. Certain guys, Chris Webber was the same way, was a better player than Bridges, but was the same way. It's like all the talent to be a number 1, didn't really want it. In this scenario, I know Bridges did play with Winston, but not this version of Winston that we're drafting. Right. I think the best version of Gary Harris could even be the second banana. Like, Bridges would be the 3rd best player on this team, or 2B to Gary Harris's 2A. That's where I think it's an even better pick, because you're getting the most talented player in the draft, and he doesn't have to be the alpha dog. So I love that pick. I think it's a no-brainer in particular.
Yeah. And it heads back to me now, right?
Bouncing back to you, Chris.
Again, I'm not doing all Michigan guys. I swear to you. I swear. but I'm building a roster here. I'm doing the Herb Brooks principle. Okay. I don't want the best players. I want the right ones. I'm constructing my roster here. You got Burke, talked about him. You got Mo Wagner, who is a versatile 4, potentially even a 5. But while I praised Burke as an on-ball defender, there are limitations to his game because he was only 6'1". I want a guy with an insane wingspan who is capable of driving, capable of scoring, but also capable of locking somebody down. And that's why I'm going with Mo's brother. I'm going Franz Wagner with
It's not fair. It just totally pick-cucked me.
Yeah. Was that where you were going with? Because I think there are people, and I get this, who viewed Franz Wagner's 2 years at Michigan as something of a disappointment just in terms of his overall performance. He was in his second year, a 12-plus point a game guy on a team that had a whole lot of scores. But I think that when you look at the advanced numbers, I don't know if there was a better defender in the country on the ball. He had incredible instincts, and I think that that's a guy, especially when you look at this team, he's your 3 because you got your 2 scorers. You got Burke, you got Mo Wagner. You can go to Franz, who can be a guy who, in a Final Four scenario, could be someone who has a 5 for 6 from 3-point range type of game, and who can lock down probably your other team's best defender on the court. So I'm going Franz. This will probably the most controversial pick so far, because of, he was not an All-American. He was not even, I think, in the All-Conference conversation. Should have been first team defensive all conference, but we know that that's a joke. I mean, Draymond, I don't think, or no, who was it that was real? Oh no, it was Tillman who didn't make first team all conference when he was the best defensive player maybe in the country. But
no, that was Wagner. Wagner didn't make a defensive.
No, I'm saying that both did. I know they both did, but Tillman didn't.
I mean,
Tillman won defensive player of the year, but that was in 2020.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. That's what it was. In 21, he didn't. Right. So, I like just the makeup of that roster thus far, that you have a guy he can be that Swiss Army knife on a night where maybe Burke's not shooting well from outside. You can have a guy who's capable of shutting down the best player on the floor and going off for 18, 20 on his best night. So Franz Wagner's my number 3.
I got to say that was the first pick that was more than 5 picks deviation from the board I have in front of me.
That's fair.
Yeah, I mean, maybe he'll go 5 for 6 in the Final Four. I'm guessing that 6 shot will be the last one to win the game, right? Because I think he had the worst.
God damn it! I didn't even think about
that. Jake Weiler sailing the ball and getting that kid killed, and not another team movie, was the only play that was comparable in terms of just how horrific it was. And that was a movie that was fiction.
But at the same time, let me a counter argument. And you're right. That was a lame duck, like tripping over a fucking banana peel of a performance, right? But is it that much worse than Bridges against Syracuse? I mean, clanking
just
threes.
The entire team clanked that. Like it was definitely partially on Bridges, but the entire team.
And he was the guy. He was the guy. I mean, is it that much worse? And one was in the Elite Eight. One was at Little Caesars Arena in the second round against a double-digit.
If you want to talk about totality of performance, maybe in terms of an individual moment.
Yeah, okay, you're right. That's right.
Can I draw some iron on the shot, please, sir?
Yeah, there was a borderline a Blake O'Neal element to that shot. I mean, that's a memeable moment. I will give you that. But I'm saying as a number 3 in this as an option here, you are correct. I understand that. That's a fair point.
I do agree. I think you probably drafted the best and most versatile defender that you could in this draft.
Yeah.
I see what you're doing in terms of the roster construction. It makes sense.
I mean, I was totally getting ready to go. All right, I'm going to throw Draymond and Franz at you, and you're just not scoring. I mean, you're not going to score. So, so that's back to me now, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yep, you.
So I look at these first 2 picks. I've got some Detroit energy in Kalen Lucas. I've got, I believe Draymond's from Flint.
Saginaw.
Saginaw.
Nasty.
I've got that mid-Michigan kind of flair with Draymond. This next pick, it's a little flashier, but I was a guy that kind of worked himself into from nothing. I mean, this is someone who wasn't even on Michigan's radar until late in the recruiting process. I'm going with Keras Levert, a guy that, in his best year, I know he battled some injuries. First Wolverine picked by me, by the way. 16.5 points per game, 5.3 rebounds per game, a little under 5 assists, shot a little under 45% from 3-point range in his best season. Just a guy who found a way to turn himself into basically an end of bench guy that was just filling out the end of the 13-man scholarship limit to the best player on Michigan's roster by the time his senior year rolled around. So I like what he brings to the table from, in terms of the scoring element. I think gives me a nice little wing duo not a wing duo, but nice little backcourt duo with Kalen Lucas, Keras Levert. So that's my pick there. There was another direction I was thinking of going. I'm not going to say it because Justin's got 2 picks here, and this guy might be there when we come back around. But now that I have my 3, you kind of have a 3-man battery that fills out a team that can go deep in the tournament. I feel pretty good about where I stack up with the rest of you guys.
Good pick. Yeah.
Yeah,
I will
can't
say
argue.
just this. The one thing that will knock him is his last 2 seasons, he played a total of 33 games over 2 seasons. So
Right.
you're looking at a guy whose durability has been an issue. It extended, unfortunately, into the NBA, just stuff that's been out of his control in some instances. But talk about a great story. Again, Beeline was as good as anybody as finding diamond in the roughs and turning these guys into pros. And I think that Keras Levert is kind of the extreme example. I hope that he can stay healthy kind of going forward because, again, he looked like he's blossoming in the star, and then he's had a couple setbacks, and it's kind of been the story of his career, unfortunately.
Yeah, I agree. He's got to stay healthy in this scenario for a maximum of 80 minutes, though. So if he can get through that, his injury history, we are getting him at its peak, presumably. So it would have to be a new injury in the 2 potential games here. So, yeah, there's a couple ways you could have gone. This is where it gets interesting, where like there are 6 or 7 good options for me with the next 2 picks. I'm looking at my roster, and this is where my current roster construction matters. So I have Denzel Valentine and Nick Stauskas. I would argue a B- defender and like a C- defender.
Mhm.
That's a problem in this scenario. I can't go into war with a bunch of average to mediocre defenders that will be driving what I do next. Now, I have 2 guys that at their peak were averaging 18 and 19 points a game, respectively. That's pretty good. I think I have good primary scoring to where I can prioritize defense here. And I'm going to go double dip back to back in this scenario. Next pick, Xavier Tillman, Michigan State.
Knew you were going to take him.
Big. Yeah, I said he was kind of baby Draymond. I said he had the second highest defensive IQ of any Michigan State player in my lifetime. I think Draymond was a level above, but Tillman was so good at some things you see in the box score. Yeah. I mean, his numbers were impressive at his peak. He was good on paper, but he was even better if you just watched. He was always in the right spot. He would cut off a passing lane at the last second and trap the driver who was trying to kick it. Xavier Simpson will tell you all about that. I remember anytime he would try to drive, Tillman would cut him off and Simpson had nowhere to go. He did that against everybody in the country, though. He was so good. Have to take him. And again, he can score again at his peak. He was scoring at his peak too.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's not like I'm taking Ben Wallace here either. 14 and 10, elite defensively, 3-time champion in this rivalry, went to a Final Four. To me, that was sort of the obvious pick. And I'm going right in the same lane, not quite the same IQ, but certainly a better athlete, a freak in his own right. Jaren Jackson Jr., next pick off the board. I just took back-to-back Big Ten Defensive Players of the Year. I do not want any Ben Carter jokes because I will get up and walk away. But, I just, with the current construction I have, 2 primary scorers that are adequate at best on their best day defensively. I had to go double-double defensively to be competitive in this scenario. I think Jaren Jackson Jr., again, single-season shot block record for Michigan State, and that's a storied program with a lot of good centers, going back to Kevin Willis and Greg Kelser back in the day. So to lead the program all time in that for a single season is its own impressive mark. And I don't think he's similar from that Bridges mold where, like, I never want that guy in the NBA or in college to be my alpha or maybe not even my second banana. In this scenario, he's my 3rd or 4th guy. I think he really thrives, and I think he really addresses what I need in particular. So with 2 shaky defenders in my first 2 picks, I come back with 2 of the best defenders in the entire draft. So we go back-to-back, Xavier Tillman and Jaren Jackson Jr.
Have any other players that we have on the board won a Defensive Player of the Year? I think those are the only 2 guys in this draft that we've selected from this time. I don't know if there's anybody else in that.
They're the only ones that won the conference Big Ten Player of the Year. Defensive Player.
Yes, Conference Big Ten Player of the Year. Or Defensive Player of the Year. Yes.
Yeah. And with my first 2 picks, I had to double dip defense.
Let me just say, for the record, I think you choosing Tillman over Jackson is exactly how I would have done it. I came very close to taking Harris and Tillman this last time because I think that if you're talking again about the defensive versatility, Draymond's right there. I think Tillman was maybe one of the most underrated bigs that Izzo has ever had. Yeah. I got his jersey downstairs framed. Like, he was unbelievably good. And the year that he won Defensive Player of the Year, it was just loaded with bigs. Luka Garza was part of that group. The game at Iowa at his place the last, I think, like 10 or 11 minutes, he held him to 0 points in a stand when they needed it. And I don't know. Tillman is just up there for me. Talk about a winner. Talk about a glue guy. I think give me one sec. Yeah, I pulled the stats because I was hoping to draft him myself. In the game against Zion Williamson against Duke, 19 points, 9 rebounds, 3 steals, 2 blocks. He was 8 for 12 from the field. Zion Williamson scored 24 points, but he did it on 19 shots, and he turned it over 5 times in that. Like, he was in his shit the entire night. It was honestly one of the most impressive defensive performances against maybe one of the most dominant college players inside the arc we've ever seen. So real kudos to you on the pick. I like it.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. We addressed a need here, and now I can feel I can go into battle somewhat credibly, and I'm not the Civ team defensively. So that sends it right back around to you, Anthony. Who we got?
Yeah, I don't want to say pickings are getting slim, but we're starting to see some tiers separate themselves here. And a guy is still on the board. And Justin, I'll say my next pick was going to be Jaren Jackson because, again, I was trying to get a little freaky defensively there, but that's all right. Looking at who's still on the board, I mean, this guy that I'm going to take, he's a more recent member of this list, someone who I think over the last couple of years has been sorry, we're doing this live. So yeah, 2-time All-American, 18.6 points per game this season, 8.6 rebounds per game. Someone who tested the NBA draft waters last year. The league told him he had to take his game a little further away from the basket. He did, shot 32.8% from 3. I'm going with Hunter Dickinson. And now I have a front court in Hunter Dickinson and Draymond Green that I don't want to there's a little bit of like Lambeer Mahorn stuff going on here, just in terms of villains that I could build this front court around. So that's my guy there. Balanced it out. 2 Spartans, 2 Wolverines so far. I look at some of the other options on the board. If I wanted to take a true center, again, Draymond gave me the ability to be a little flexible in what I took, but I went with the best player available on my board, and Hunter Dickinson, based on what he was this year, he was the lead option for Michigan, and I think he only gets more dangerous the better talent you have around him. And so far, I feel really good about what I have.
I like the pick because – oh, sorry. Go ahead, Chris.
No, go ahead. I was just going to say I like it as well. I'd say the one caveat I'll throw in there, and I know he's still playing, so I guess I got to be slightly cautious about that, is the 2 games in the tournament that they've played, their last game, he's struggled in both of them against both UCLA as well as Villanova. Basically took as many shots to score as many points. He's really struggled in that. Had a chance to go to a Final Four and just didn't really perform in that series. So the one knock on him right now is perhaps he hasn't shown the ability to kind of get them over the hump for it. And again, maybe there's just not exactly the perfect fit team the last couple of years to kind of put around him. Yeah,
and part of it too, when I look at what Hunter Dickinson has done in the postseason in his first 2 years, is a guy that's 7'1", 7'2", 260, whatever it is. I've seen him get pushed around a little bit. It happened in the Big Ten tournament this year. Yeah. It happened, I think, in that last game against Villanova. So that is a concern, but I feel like you put him next to a defender like Draymond, and you're going to mitigate some of those concerns. So, or a player like Draymond, I should say. So I feel good about that still. That's who I'm rolling with here. I don't know where else I would have gone there, to be honest with you.
I mean,
and at the same time, you know what? As you're right about some of those tournament performances, but the only reason they got to the Sweet 16 last year was he was the best player on the floor for those first 2 games.
Absolutely.
I mean, Tennessee had absolutely no answer for him in the second half of that game. So, I mean, I think you do kind of have to take it on a, game by game basis, though I do understand your argument. All right. So let me check my roster here. I'm not trying to do this. I'm not trying to go all U of M guys, but I'm constructing this based on how I want the roster to look. And I have a great point guard. I have a really good 4. I have a guy in Franz who's so versatile, who could play probably 4 of the 5 different positions on the floor. I need another pure scorer, and I am digging way deep here in an era, a guy from an era that was not exactly fruitful when it comes to Michigan basketball. But when you look at his numbers from the 3 years that he played, one of the more efficient players in Michigan basketball history. I mean, nearly a 1,600 point scorer. He just happened to play for some crap teams. I'm going Manny Harris with my fourth pick. This is a guy who you look at the 3 years he played, but when you look at his best year, this was an 18-point a game scorer. He was a prolific scorer. Now, like I said, you could argue volume was not exactly on a team full of guys that could, that could shoot, guys who could drive, guys who could score. But when I look at this roster, you already have your built-in scorers. You have Burke and you have the two Wagners. I think a guy like Manny Harris as a fourth option who was pretty darn consistent when it came to being able to slash and drive as a fourth option, probably playing, if not the 2 guard, the 3 guard. Obviously you can move Franz around the roster there. I saw somebody in the comments said, Chris, I'm not going U of M guys, Castellani. I'm sorry. I had my guys on the board. I really did. And I next pick, we'll circle back around. I promise I'll take the best guy available, regardless of what school they attended. But I'm really trying to build this around, how strong can this roster be? Manny Harris gets very overlooked because the teams he played for were awful, but he was an excellent college player. And I think that for a fourth option on this team, he can do wonders.
I hate the pick. I think it's the worst pick that's been made.
That's fair. That's fair.
By far, the worst shooter of any of the scorers on this list, by far. 3-point percentage at his peak year, 30.8. The next worst one I can find, for the small guys, I'm not even counting Sims, is like 36, 35. I mean, he was 4 or 5% worse from deep versus the field here in terms of the scores. I mean, the top 10, 15 guys we're looking at, even from the field generally, shot in the low 40s. Not a special defensive player. I'm happy that you took him. I'll be thrilled to go against him because I'm not worried about him.
And I'll be thrilled to watch Jaren Jackson sit on the bench in the second half of your game. So that'll be. I think we're pretty even in that aspect.
Only if I take Ben Carter. So as long as I don't take Ben Carter,
I love you. I'm fucking with you.
Look, one day, it won't be tonight. DK and I are going to do the show, and I'm sure I've never talked about this with DK. I'm sure he disagrees with me.
I think I'd have to go back and watch that game again.
The Ben Carter thing is the biggest myth in the Michigan State fan base, at least on the basketball side. It's the biggest myth ever.
Yeah.
Jaren Jackson had a bad game like everybody else. The offense was getting horrible looks, and we're missing them. Ben Carter came in. They got much better looks.
Let's just move on. Who cares? Let's talk about it another time. Let's move on. It's all good.
That's all. We're going to go into no, that will be addressed at a later date because we have to myth bust. That's part of what we do. We try to correct the record. I don't know. I'll tell you the story of Ben Carter reaching out to me. And I had a long conversation with Ben Carter about that game and where he stood. That'll be a fascinating show. And it was not off the record. He doesn't give a shit.
So. Also, Chris, this is war. So talk your shit, man.
We're all having fun. I'm 2 hours away from my birthday, so I'm just trying to enjoy this shit.
Oh, that's nice.
So our producer Ben is speculating that DK got fucked out of a pick. Did we miss a DK pick somewhere?
I think so. Don't I get the next two?
No, he's got the next two. So he's gone 3 so far. So he'll get the next two.
We missed. I think Ben's just wrong, right? I mean, I think we're good. I don't think we screwed anything up.
Nope. I'm right here on the next two
picks. He'll have 5, and then it'll roll back over to us.
We'll be good.
I don't know. Ben.
So it is. It's my pick now.
Yeah.
For 2.
The one thing when I was looking at this board, where you kind of just you're looking at the roster construction, all the guys, for how good Michigan State has been at developing bigs, there's kind of a lack of just centers generally in this draft that you're kind of looking at. So I'm actually going to go Adrian Payne with this one. Going to pair him with Harris, who obviously played with him. I mean, his senior season, first off, rest his soul. That was just such a tragedy that happened. Trying to help somebody out and get shot, just absolutely awful. But senior year Payne was pretty special. 16.4 points, 7.3 rebounds on the season. He shot 42.3% from deep on some volume. I kind of like him as maybe the 5 in this equation next to Bridges as the 4. I think there's some athleticism. You can pick and roll him. You can pick and pop him. There's a little bit more space. And then for the small forward position to kind of fill out the first 5 on the roster, I'm finally taking my first Michigan guy off the board. And for me, that guy is going to be Tim Hardaway Jr., who was a winner. I think he kind of fits in perfectly here, has some size, nice to kind of pair with Harris, a guy that's capable of, pulling up from deep as well as from that mid-range level. And I think kind of just like a really underrated guy. He's kind of had a similar career in the NBA as he had in college, where he's just a really perfect fill-in piece. And really, I don't think that Burke has the run that he does if Tim Hardaway Jr. is not beside him as a junior in that. I think he really added, the veteran presence to that roster that made the national title game. So I think I'm extremely happy with the way that the first five has worked out. Sad I missed out on Tillman. I was honestly hoping to snag him, but other than that, I'm happy.
Yeah, good pick. Both those guys, especially Payne, I was going to go with. I think that Hardaway, you're right. The problem with Hardaway is you knew from his first shot whether or not he was going to have it. He was a very, very streaky player. He could go for 25 and he could go for 5, but excellent athlete. Really one of the more underappreciated. We talk about Burke and we talk about that class, but Hardaway came in before any of those guys did on that 2011 team. And I'm now for this pick, this is where I'm swallowing my pride a little bit. Not necessarily. I don't give a shit, but I'm swallowing my pride because this was a guy I did not like when he was in college. I thought he sucked for 3 years, and people hyped him up and acted like he was this amazing athlete, amazing player, and he came alive. But when I look again, this is a big part of the construction of my roster. I have 4 scorers right now. Burke can score, the Wagners can score, and Manny Harris can score. I need boards. I need a guy who can go up and give me 8 to 10 rebounds a game. And that's why I'm going Brendan Dawson with my pick. This is a guy who I think one of the issues he ran into his first few years is that there was this expectation that he could be a shooter, could be a scorer. He was never that guy. But when you look at that 2015 Final Four run, when you had Trice and you had Denzel, and you needed somebody who could collect boards, get the putbacks, be a great defender and a really good athlete, I think that somebody like Brendan Dawson really fit that mold. And I think that that's when I look at the makeup of the 4 players I've taken so far, and especially with Franz, who was capable very much so of getting those 6 to 8 boards a game, I think we have a few guys capable of eating glass when somebody like Burke probably would not be able to because of their size. So Brendan Dawson, resume speaks for itself, a Big Ten title, 2 Big Ten tournament titles, and a Final Four appearance. That's my last, or not my last pick, but my last pick of the.
And one of the more surprising, I would argue, Big Ten tournament most outstanding players in my lifetime was.
He was great. He was great.
I mean, he just, that's not like when you think of guys in this rivalry or just in the Big Ten generally, like people forget that Brendan Dawson won a Big Ten tournament most outstanding player. He was so good. He averaged 15 and 7, but famously he shot 75% from the field in that Big Ten tournament. I mean, he was going like 8 for 10, 6 for 9. Like, it was incredible. He had such a good run, was very good defensively in that run. First team, you mentioned all Big Ten defense. So you're getting a dog on that end. A really good pick, especially at this point, to get a guy that was an elite defender and could score around the rim pretty much at will when he was at his best. So I like that pick a lot. That was a great. It offsets the horrible Manny Harris pick.
We got 4 scorers and a guy who can eat glass, so we're in good shape right now.
Yeah, good choice. Good choice.
Yeah.
Oh man, this next one is difficult because there's a couple guys I'm looking at, and spoiler, like it's going to be a Michigan guy. The Homer has returned. I have joined the chat.
You've already got 2 state guys, so you're ahead of me, man.
Yeah, I'm ahead of the game here. Equal, we are, if not an inclusive podcast here. So, gosh, I will say this. My next pick concerns me because when I pull the trigger on it, which I'm going to, my backcourt will be stocked with 2 guys that are 6'1". So if we run into someone in this tournament or in this Final Four that has a lengthy backcourt, I might kind of be screwed. If Franz Wagner goes up against me, I might kind of be screwed here. But I like, again, this next pick is a culture pick. It's a pedigree pick. It's a winning pick. This next guy played 5 years at Michigan, made the Sweet 16 every single year he was there, a defensive stopper, someone who shot 40% from 3, someone who I think is going to be a really good complement to Kalen Lucas in my backcourt. I'm going with Eli Brooks.
Oh,
Whoa! That is not who I
Eli.
thought you were going with.
You thought he was going livers, didn't you?
I thought I'm not going to say who because I want to.
I thought he was going Xavier Simpson, but I was like, as soon as he said 40% from three, I knew it wasn't him.
And when he said Sweet 16, that threw me for a loop too. Okay, all right.
Yeah, you can have him. Okay, so I mean, he's fine. I just a few picks too early, but nothing will top Castellani taking the Ricky Davis of this rivalry.
Okay, dude, no, okay, come on. Manny Harris as a college player was substantially more productive than Eli Brooks.
Yeah, more productive. He was a loser. Eli Brooks is a winning player. I would take Eli Brooks in a second over the Ricky Davis of this rivalry, which is what Manny Harris was. Guy, I mean, great. He scored 17 points on 6 of 19 shooting. Like, it's fantastic.
But we're not drafting based on the rivalry, though, necessarily. We're drafting on the roster construction of these 4 teams going up against each other.
Well, they're all the same. They're playing a bunch of Wolverines and Spartans. It'll be 10 Spartans and Wolverines.
That's fair. Though the one downside to my pick is that he never made it deep into the tournament. So it's like, made it to the second round. He made it as far as Miles Bridges did. But
no matter what happens, I'm off the hook, whether you think this was a reach or not. So thank you for that.
Right.
Yeah, you're good. I don't think anyone will top that, although there's still time. All right, so this one, for my next one, look, now I have 5 players, and 3 of them are below average defensively, to put it kindly. But I got to take them. Best scorer left on the board, I would argue, Drew Neitzel, point guard for Michigan State. One of the rare guys who had a worse senior year. If you want to throw Cassius in there, fine. There was a huge mitigating circumstance, obviously, with the tragedy that he dealt with. I think he's kind of exempt. I can't think of another example where there wasn't an injury, there wasn't any huge mitigating circumstance, and a guy just somehow got worse. Wasn't bad his senior year, but was clearly better his junior year, but had a run, 18 points a game. You know, he was shooting a little over 41% from 3, automatic at the line. If he's open, it's going in. He was good at getting to the rack. When he gets fouled, shots are going in. One of the best at the line in the history of this conference. And when you're into the high 80s, we were getting near Ray Allen territory at that point. I just think at this point in the draft, you're getting a guy who was considered one of the 2 or 3 best players in that conference for like a 3-year run, or certainly a 2-year run. I like the value. I feel like I need one more guy that can handle the ball. I don't have a true point guard on the roster yet. I have some ball handling, but I don't have a true point guard. I got to take him. So Neitzel is the pick. I'll let you weigh in on that in a second. DK in particular, I'm fascinated. Do you think I'm crazy taking him? To me, I think that was obvious. The next pick's a little bit tougher. I could go really any way I want here. I already got a big guy, I got a little guy, and I got 3 guys kind of in the middle. So I have so many options. I am going to go with the Swiss Army knife, Aaron Henry. And this may be my most controversial pick. But in this scenario, Aaron Henry can do a little bit of everything. He's going to be my 5th or 6th option, good defensively, just a responsible kid, a good guy in this situation. He was one of the only guys that really showed up in the Texas Tech Final Four game, made an incredible run there to cut it to 1 late before the game slipped back away. I like that he can do so many different things. He can guard multiple different guys in this scenario. I think there's an argument for 6 other guys. I'm not saying this was a slam dunk. I think Neitzel for my situation was. I like the Henry pick. I don't know. Am I crazy here with these picks back to back?
I don't think so personally. I mean, Aaron Henry is one of the more underrated players again at Michigan. He dragged them to the tournament that year. I don't think there's very many guys on the list that can say that they just took their team to the tournament. He kept the streak alive basically himself down the stretch. He's versatile. You can play him probably anywhere from 2 to 4, so I like that. In terms of the Drew Neitzel pick, I don't hate it because, again, you have Denzel who's 6'5", so you have a little bit more flexibility to take a guy next to him that's a little smaller. So I don't really see a problem with either of the picks.
If I got your approval, I feel good because you're better at it. All right.
Back to Anthony, right?
Throw it to Anthony, yep.
Yeah.
Back to me. Well, I feel like I have a pretty good starting 5 here now, or at least the best starting 5 I could put together. It's in stone now. So I've got Kalen Lucas, Eli Brooks, Draymond Green, Hunter Dickinson, Keras Levert. I can get a little weird now. I can take the best player on the board. I feel like I've filled the needs I have pretty well. So I'm going with the guy who I think is, when I look up and down the list of what's left here, I think arguably the best athlete left in this draft pool, someone who was a 5-star recruit, didn't quite live up to that pedigree, but I thought someone who was pretty good, especially, in his final season at Michigan. I'm going Glenn Robinson III. I think the idea that he's probably more of like a 3 or a 4, more of a 4 if I bring him off the bench and play him next to Draymond in a small ball type of lineup. Only ever shot, I think, about 30% from 3, or at least in his best season. So I like GR3. He's someone that can be a lob threat as well. Someone who's really athletic around the basket. So that's my pick here.
That was probably my runner up for one of my last 2 picks. I really like that pick. A very good player in this scenario where he's, your 4th, 5th, 6th best guy. I like that pick a lot. Very solid.
Now it's to me. 6th man essentially coming off the bench. I'm going to go with who is, in my opinion, maybe the most underappreciated player. And I'm not going to say underappreciated, but just somebody that I do not think has gotten the love he's gotten during the Izzo era. I'm going Matt Mcquaid. Because with Matt Mcquaid, 6th guy, first guy off the bench, you have a incredibly versatile defender. That it's well documented. They beat Michigan 3 times. A big reason for it was his defensive prowess, and also the fact that he's another guy similar to Franz Wagner. He's not as talented as an athlete, but similar to Franz Wagner, a guy who can come off the bench and you look up, oh man, the guy went for 20. He went, 4 for 8 from 3. He went 5 for 6 from 3-point range. I think that he's capable of doing that. Spark plug coming off of the bench and can play the 2, can play the 3. Good energy guy, really good leader. I think first guy coming off the bench, you could do a lot worse. So Matt Mcquaid is my pick.
Great choice. I mean, just you're getting shooting. You mentioned the defense.
Yeah.
Again, a great kid. He's not going to care if he gets his shots or not. Yeah. He's going to take what's there. He bailed Michigan State out when his buddy Kyle Arns went down in the Big Ten tournament, shot the lights out in that game.
Yeah.
You're getting everything. And people forget how good defensively he was. It's because he was kind of an atypical body, and he's kind of a gangly white guy. It's people forget this guy's one of the best defensive players for 4 years now, or for 3 years anyway in that conference. So
yeah,
great pick. I mean, he could have gone 6, 7, 8 picks ago, and it would have been a solid pick then. So that was a good one.
Underappreciated player, man. I would say in that 2019 team, I'd have to look at the advanced numbers. You could make the argument he was the 2nd best player on that team behind Cassius. I mean, he was so important to that run that they made to the Final Four.
Yeah, he was great. All right.
Back to me. I get the next 2, right?
Yep.
You got it.
Okay. So just looking at the board, this kind of shaped out exactly how I wanted it. I have Cassius Winston, one of the best pick and roll point guards in a long time in the conference. You got to surround that guy with shooting. And the next 2 guys I'm going, both shooters. Isaiah Livers, I think, is honestly a perfect pick to put next to Cassius. If you look at the situation, you could probably slide Bridges up. And so I could have a lineup of Cassius, Harris, Bridges, and Isaiah Livers with Adrian Payne. That's all 5 guys who at some point in time have shot 38, 39% and above on the floor. It's super sexy. And the other guy that I'm going with is Bryn Forbes, because Bryn Forbes and Cassius Winston next to each other. Again, he had that senior year. What did he hit? 7 or 8 threes at Michigan his senior year? Just absolutely lit it up. Probably maybe the best all-around shooter behind Nick Stauskas. It's maybe in this draft. If you're talking just from a pure just aesthetics and the way he could shoot the nylon. So I'm going with Livers and Forbes as the 2 guys on my bench.
Raining threes with both those guys. I mean, you have a guy 44% from 3 and 48% from 3. I mean, those guys have good, solid percentages from the floor, but from 3. I mean, for a guard, that your team is going to get Winston driving.
We're going to get some shots up for sure.
I mean, people are going to be collapsing on Cassius driving, and he's going to have options galore, and they're not going to miss. So I'm cool with the double dipping on the. I mean, those are 2 of the best 5 shooters in this draft. So, I can't argue there.
This is where this might be a controversial pick, what I'm about to go with, because he had a relatively small sample size. He became a program guy, but he's not a Xavier Simpson. He's not a Hardaway, one of these 3-year guys, but who I believe was one of my favorite all-time Michigan players when he was on the floor. I'm going Chandi Brown for my next pick. I think that Chandi Brown Jr., when you look at the numbers, you look at, the reference pages, per 40, which is a skewed stat, obviously, per 40 was Michigan's best player for that Elite 18 that year, became an elite 3-point shooter, an absolute, just a junkyard dog defensively. Just an absolute freak, just moved all around the floor. We're talking about your second guy off the bench being able to provide that for your team. It's similar to Mcquaid, though I think that Mcquaid probably, despite having, being good in similar aspects, probably offers a bit of a different skill set. But Chandi, in terms of having a motor, was undefeated. Only 1 year at Michigan, but we are drafting guys. You made the parameters on their peak in college. Chandi's peak that 1 year at Michigan. They don't win the Big Ten if he's not on that roster transferring from Wake Forest. So that's my next pick.
I like it. It's off the board. It's off my board, but it's someone I didn't really think about. I mean, that's when you get to this stages of the draft, you're looking for guys that are going to come off the bench and kind of will you to victory if they needed to. That's not the type of guy I'm going with my next pick here. This one's tough. I feel like I hit the 2 Spartans right off the bat. I'm not, in terms of my roster construction, I'm not really crazy about what's left here, but I'm trying not to waffle so we keep this moving. I'm going to go with the guy who I think was I think is one of the most overlooked players of the John Beilein era at Michigan, and that's Derek Walton Jr. I need a backup point guard. Brooks can play the point, but I like him better off the ball. Derek Walton, I mean, that's a guy who, when I think of his legacy at Michigan, I forget the fact that his best season, 15.5 points per game, 5 assists, 42% from 3-point range. Just a guy who, talk about guys that will you to victory. That plane crash run through the Big Ten tournament, and then the little mini run they went on in the NCAAs. I mean, that is John Beilein was so good at squeezing every single possible drop he could out of the group he had. Talent be damned. Similar to Izzo a lot of ways, except less Final Fours obviously. But Derek Walton, to have a guy like that coming off my bench, I think I could do so much worse than that, given the guys that are still on the board. So there we go. Also, the first basketball recruiting interview I ever did. So,
I want to point out for the record that was going to be my next pick. I only have one Michigan guy, and then the next 2 guys on my board are Spartans. So everyone's going to say that I was going the homer pick. I was going to take him. I can't believe he slipped through my fingers. I thought I was going to steal him. To me, in terms of value, the best pick in the draft right there in terms of value, because
potentially he was way better than people remember. Like his so
underrated.
Yeah.
You mentioned the 42% from 3, but it wasn't just the rate. It was the volume. He led the entire conference in 3-point makes that year. So, it's one thing if you're shooting 42% from 3, but you're selectively taking wide open looks or whatever. There's nothing artificial about that 42%. Like that was an earned 42%. He's shooting high volume at a high rate. That's a rare sort of hole to go through. I think one of the most underappreciated guys in this rivalry, you mentioned in passing the plane incident. I mean, that team was the 8th seed and had the adversity of dealing with that and winning it. It was so incredible. And he played incredibly in that. And from what I heard, I don't know if you guys have heard anything contrasting. Derek Walton was like the leader of the group that was like, let's go. Like we're playing, because there had been some discussions of let's miss that first game.
It was
the practice jerseys.
Zach Irvin was the guy who was like, I don't want to play. And he was the one who was leading, being like, no, we're going. And it's one of my favorite Nick Baumgartner quotes of all time is that they went the next day and Baumgartner said, Michigan shellacked a team that played in their underwear, which is basically what happened. Is they played a game in their practice jerseys, and obviously it led to that magical run. And he had about a 15-game stretch where he averaged like, I mean, he was one of the best players in college basketball for the last month and a half of that season.
Yeah, I mean, you're getting at the end of the draft for your bench in this scenario, a 15-5-5 guy who led the Big Ten and made threes and shot at a 42% clip, and is an absolute dog, and who took an 8 seed and he's got teammates that don't even want to play after this plane incident and said, "Fuck you, we're playing anyway," and won. I mean, I'm getting that guy at this point in the draft. I was ready to celebrate getting him. I thought he was mine. I could have been. I am going to end up with only one Wolverine, but I blame Anthony. So this is, you guys are all done, right? Or am I finishing the draft, or is it snaking back to you?
No, we're moving back around because we're picking 8. This is pick number.
So this is.
So you got
for
2
me.
more. You got 2 more.
I'm finishing my roster. So, man, I don't hear any complaints about my Spartan heavy roster. I stuck to my board. It was very evenly mixed. I got fucked multiple times. I'm mad I didn't get Derek Walton Jr. I'm going to take the unrelated other side of the rivalry, Walton. Travis Walton will be my second to last pick. Here's the argument for Travis Walton. I don't need any more scorers on this team. I got Denzel, Stauskas, Neitzel. Those are 3 guys that averaged almost 20 points a game at their peak. Jackson, Tillman, and Henry all in that 14, 15, 13 to 15 point range. I don't need any more scorers. I don't care. I don't have 8 guys score 15 points in this scenario. It's not going to happen. So I don't care about scoring at this point. I couldn't care less. It doesn't mean anything to me. Travis Walton gives me the 3rd Big Ten Defensive Player of the Year on my roster, joining Tillman and Jaren Jackson Jr. I now have 3 guys out of my 8 that were the best defensive player in the entire Big Ten, let alone in this rivalry, in the entire Big Ten for an entire season. I can't argue with that. He was an absolute dog defensively. He was a good leader to the point, and I'm not going to get into the stuff with the allegations. I don't know what happened there. We're sticking to basketball. He was a captain on that team. And I still say that the 2009 Final Four run, which I would argue is the best run of any non-champion in the history of the tournament, if you look at the teams they beat. They've had to play 3 straight 1 seeds, the defending champion 3 seed Kansas, and a USC team in the second game. Have you guys seen who's on that roster? DeMar DeRozan, Nikolai Vucevic, Taj Gibson. That's 3 guys that played 10 plus years in the NBA. 2 of them are still playing at a high level now. And that doesn't even include their 2 junior guards who averaged double digits for them and were 3-year starters. Yeah. So they had 3 10-year NBA guys. 2 of those guys, one of them, DeRozan's going to be a Hall of Famer. 2 of those guys were multi-time All-Stars. That was the 10 seed. I don't know, but Travis Walton is the only reason they got by that USC team. He scored 18 points in that game against USC on 8 of 13 shooting. I played his normal great defense in that game. USC shot 1 for 10 from deep in that game. They couldn't get anything. Walton's perimeter defense, outstanding as always. MSU won that game by 5 points. And it was really more like 3 because they did the foul thing at the end.
Yeah.
If Travis Walton doesn't have an out-of-body experience, this is a guy who his point total high for the year once they got into the conference season, they weren't playing OU, was 8 points. So 30 games prior, his season high was 8. He scored 18. They needed damn near every single one of those points. That guy was a dog in the biggest spots. I don't need scoring. I'm taking him. I feel good about it. I have 3 of the best 5 defensive players in the draft. I love that pick. I'm sticking with it. This is my final pick. He wasn't going to make my roster, but because Anthony took Derek Walton,
I know exactly what you're going to do too.
I think I do too. Go ahead.
Oh, maybe. Oh, wait, you tell me. This is one of my favorite players. His jersey's on my wall downstairs.
Okay, no. So no, that's not who I thought you were going.
Goran Sutan.
Oh, okay.
Michigan State center. I need a little more height. I got Jaren Jackson Jr. at 6'11", and then my next tallest guy is 6'8". Doable. I'm not saying it can't be done. Certainly, I got enough height. My guards are, and wings are pretty big, other than Neitzel. But I want another big. But here's the scenario. Goran Sutan, we're in a tournament situation. Had one of the greatest tournament runs in the history.
He really did. Yeah.
Either of these 2 schools, if you meshed them together, he got hot for a game. It wasn't he got hot for 2 games. This guy won the regional MVP in a region that had the number 1 overall seed in the tournament, Louisville, the defending champion 3 seed, still a really good team with 3 NBA players, Kansas, 2 seed Michigan State. All these guys, even Arizona State had some guys on that team. This guy was the best player for that weekend.
Yeah. And
that they get crushed against UNC in the championship game. We all know it. One guy didn't get crushed. One guy didn't look scared in that game. Sutan had 17 and 10, had 2 blocks. Nothing hollow about it. He was good from the opening tip of that game. He was guarding Hansbrough the whole game, held him below his season average, held him below 50% shooting. He didn't lock him up, but Hansbrough had one of his worst games of his 2-year tournament run where he was really good. So he was good on both ends. I need the size. At his peak, Sutan's a veteran that showed up multiple times when the lights were brightest. I like the pick. And I will say, if they had beaten UNC somehow in that game, Sutan would have, no question, absolutely walked away with the tournament's most outstanding player. How many guys in this entire draft pool had a run where, but for the outcome of one game, would have, no question, won most outstanding player in the whole thing? There's a couple guys, but there's not that many in this group. And by the way, and I'll finish here, would Goran Sutan not be the most unlikely winner of this award? You're talking about an award that's been won by Anthony Davis, Magic Johnson, Kemba Walker, Bill Walton, Hakeem Olajuwon, Goran Sutan. One of these things is not like the other. That would have been hilarious if that had happened. But
I also think he's the prime example of an Izzo player whose legacy was written in the tournament. Like, let's say there was a pandemic in 2009 and that tournament doesn't get played. Does Sutan get drafted in this draft? I don't think so. Like, it was just and a good player, but the way he performed in that tournament, especially against Louisville in that game where he was just strapping threes. I mean, that's the most confident he ever was. One of the ultimate Izzo players where you turn it on that last year in the tournament. Fun run for sure. Yeah. Back to Anthony, you got your last one.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah, I could be stretching because I know I could be stretching the rules here. I know that we're drafting these guys based on the best version of them. And the best version of this player that I'm about to take was actually his first year at Michigan. But I'm going to reference a stat from his final year at Michigan, why I'm taking him.
I think I know who you're going with. But
with my final pick in this draft. I'm taking Duncan Robinson because in his final season at Michigan, when Duncan Robinson scored 6 or more points, Michigan was 29-0. Now, he was obviously coming off the bench. His playing time and role kind of decreased towards the latter stages of his career. But that's my 8th guy off the bench, and he's coming in and shooting 40% from 3, knowing how hot he could get. Sorry, he might be a one-trick pony, but I'm taking that every time. And I'm taking the pedigree, rounding out the culture. It's been 6 straight Wolverines. I'll be called a homer. Don't care. That's my team. My team's on the floor.
Yeah, you're at a point in the draft now where you're not taking the best guy on the board. You're filling out, what am I missing? So, yeah, that's fine with what you're looking at right now.
And that's where I'm going to. There's a few because it's the last pick, so I can kind of, talk about who I was thinking about here. One of my favorite Michigan players of all time is Muhammad Ali Abdul Rahman. Not going to go with him. Great player, 4-year starter, actually. I could go Darrell Summers here, who, despite the final year falling apart, was very good at his peak. But the one issue with this current roster is I have one main ball handler. The 2 Wagners, Manny Harris, Dawson, Mcquaid, Chandi, they're not guys who are going to bring the ball up the floor. I need a guy who can dish it. Shit. I'm choosing between 2, and it's between Travis Trice and Xavier Simpson. I'm actually changing my pick here. I'm going Travis Trice because I think that Travis Trice that last year in the modern age of basketball, I need shooters. Xavier Simpson, awesome player, great point guard, but I think Xavier Simpson's success often stemmed from the weapons that he had around him as a backup point guard who can bring the ball up the floor, who can distribute, but also can make, put up a solid percentage from 3-point range. And when, as evidenced by that 2015 Final Four run, has a little bit of dog in him. Backup point guard, Travis Trice is my last pick.
You made it difficult because that's probably where I was going with mine.
I just real quick, that was an interesting debate. The problem with Xavier Simpson, I admit, because the credentials are there with his defensive awards.
Great player. Yeah.
But I never saw that when we played them. Like Cassius Winston had no problem.
First 2 years you did. The second 2 you didn't.
Yeah, I think a big reason for that though is that was
Cassius.
That was Cassius being Cassius. I don't know if that was net like I think he did everything he could, but yeah, I get what you're saying.
No, I admit that I'm like tainted by that. Like it's just all I heard was how good defensively this guy was.
Yeah.
And Winston's scoring 24 points a game on 60% shooting. And it's like you don't impress me much, but I know the guy was incredible defensively. I think you want to go more offense or defense. Trice, again, one of the few guys on this list that won a regional MVP in the tournament. So that's alone is a good reason to take him. But yeah, go ahead, DK. I'm sorry, man.
No, that's fine. I that's an interesting debate. I think Xavier Simpson, again, it's just difficult when you don't have a shooting point guard. Michigan State's going through that a little bit right now and trying to kind of feel out how we all feel about AJ Hoggard. And it's a scenario where Simpson kind of was a similar embodiment. Like if he was wearing the green and white, the two guys could have been switched in terms of the way that coaches like to coach guys. And it would have been weird, obviously, for us in retrospect, but I think that he just kind of had that dog mentality and would have been a guy if he played at Michigan State that we all would have talked about loving that. Yeah. I think maybe he's a little bit underappreciated for Michigan fans, just the run that he had and the consistency that he gave. I know he was a flawed player, but I thought he was asked to do a lot his last 2 years. Yeah. And some of the defense slipped off a little bit because he had such a heavy role in the offense. And, there wasn't as much talent around him as maybe, what Cash got. So this is tough because I think I was going to go a ball handler on this. So I'm really between a couple options. Travis Trice was there for me. I could use probably another wing defender, but for purposes of this, I thought about going big as well, maybe taking either Matt Costello or Nick Ward. I wouldn't mind a little more offensive punch in the paint. So I was leaning Nick Ward. This would be crazy because if I don't select him, Jordan Poole isn't going to be drafted in this draft. And that's kind of a crazy
thing.
That
was going to be, when we were done, that was going to be my question. Who's the best player that didn't get drafted?
That's where
I have my list going.
This.
I have the running list of the biggest snubs that I was going to rattle off, and he's on that short list.
Yeah.
Sure.
But he wasn't that great in college, though. He
drove John Beilein nuts.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I agree with that, but he also, to a certain degree, was asked to stand in a corner and just be a shooter. And we've obviously seen that maybe he's a little bit more than that. And so it's difficult to know, was it the role he was given or was he's matured over? Maybe it's a combination of both. That's difficult. Honestly, the way that this is setting up, I'd like a guy coming off the bench. I don't know how happy he's going to be playing, 15, 20 minutes a night, but that's what he's going to get on the squad. And I'm going to take Nick Ward, just big, tough guy that ran the floor well, finished well around the rim. I know he only had one hand, but he made the best of it. And I think he was a really nice piece. He averaged basically like between 12 and 13 the 3 years over his career. So if I'm going to take a little punch off it, I got a bunch of shooting on this roster. I might like another big I can dump it into a little bit because Payne's more of a pick and pop guy. So I'm going to go Nick Ward to finish it.
If I could put one skill on a player that lacked it in the history of Michigan State basketball that I've been alive for, top 5 choice would be letting Nick Ward be able to pass out of a fucking double team.
Okay.
He would have been.
I thought you were going to go jump shot. All right. Yeah.
No, I don't need that from him. I mean, that'd be great. Like, sure, it'd be wonderful. There's a lot of things. Every player is a flaw. That would be wonderful to have Nick Ward be a great shooter. I don't even need that. Nick Ward could not be guarded one-on-one by almost anybody. He had such good, similar to Derek Nix, I think a little better at their on their best day.
Yeah.
Couldn't be guarded one-on-one by 95% of the guys walking the earth in college basketball at the time. So he required double teams, and he could not ever pass out of them adequately. It was always a turnover, or he would go up in the trees and get stuffed. And it's just, if he had developed, he didn't have to be great. He didn't have to be Chris Webber dishing out of the post. But if he had just become a C+ post passer, like he was good, he could have been so much better. I had to throw that in there, but he was on my list for biggest snub if he didn't get taken. So no problem taking Nick Ward. I love Nick Ward, for the record.
I think it works with the balance of the team. I got a couple guys that can play up or down a few positions. I really only have one center, and Payne honestly played more power forward than he did center during the course of his career. So
I like all the rosters. I want to see, Ben will throw this up in the post edit and we'll have a beautiful graphic and we're going to see them and visualize them. And it'll be an interesting Twitter poll. Castellani is the most followers by far, and it's a Michigan primary.
I'm not going to retweet it because that's unfair. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that.
Well, it's not fair because they're gonna vote for me because I have all the Michigan State guys because Anthony stole my second Wolverine. So there's no fair way to do this, which is why there's no prize involved. But we will be having a poll. It'll be interesting to see. I want to visualize everything real quick. I just want to rattle off the biggest snubs that I had off the top of my head. I jotted a few down. You took Nick Ward. You rescued him. I would take the slightly worse version of Nick Ward, Derek Nix, throw him in there.
Mm-hmm.
Rahman Morgan, one of the 8 to 10 most talented Michigan State players in this pool, didn't perform to that level, so it's defensible that he didn't get taken, but he was phenomenal. Great in that UConn Final Four game, by the way. You can't take that away from him. We mentioned Jordan Poole. Iggy Bristakis, I thought he'd be a good, kind of punk dude in this scenario.
It's that 0-3, that Texas Tech game, the 1 year. It skews everything. If that team, even the 0-3 against Michigan State, if they beat Texas Tech and go to the Final Four that year, we're having a completely different conversation.
I agree. Yeah. I don't think he should have been taken necessarily, but if we're talking about quote unquote snubs or guys that were kind of on the edge for me, there's not many guys that were effective to that level, was 15, 16 points a game that didn't get taken. He's kind of the best.
Did Deshaun Sims get taken? He didn't get taken either, did he?
No.
He was my next one. Yep.
Almost 17-7.
The problem is, and that's why I do understand your contempt for the Manny Harris pick, is those teams were shit and they had two guys that were good. They were volume guys that year. You look at that roster and the points per game. That last year you had Douglas and Novak before they were kind of the dogs that they became. You had two guys that were really good who accumulated a lot of shots and a lot of points. Sims was excellent his last year, but the team didn't even make the NIT. So it's hard to really be like, oh man, woe is me when it comes to drafting him.
I mean, if I were to be given a 9th pick, I think the biggest snub is probably Darrell Summers, just because I don't think anybody else that didn't get picked won a regional MVP. And that was, he wins the regional MVP beating the Northern Iowa team that somehow beat Kansas and then Tennessee. And then in the Butler game where nobody could score, nobody was doing anything. It was a 52-50 game. He was 14 and 10 and shot 5 of 8 or something, was very effective. So I just, I think it's tough to leave out a guy that won MVP of a regional and was really good in the Final Four game that he played. Yeah. But not egregious.
His senior year was an implosion, though. That team almost didn't make the tournament.
That affects that's why Kalen Lucas dropped. Kalen Lucas was so freaking good his time at Michigan State, but they remember that number 2 preseason, kind of first round exit. But I'm looking at my spreadsheet here because I was keeping track of it. 32 players drafted. I believe only 2. I could be wrong. I believe only 2 did not make it to the second weekend of the NCAA. Or no, 3. I'm sorry. Manny Harris is in there. But only 2 Spartans did not make it to the second weekend of the NCAA tournament. Every guy here either made it to the third weekend. Most of them played in a Final Four. I believe Miles Bridges, Jaren Jackson, Manny Harris, the only ones that did not make it to the second weekend of the tournament.
Yeah, I mean, Bridges.
What's the count in Michigan versus Michigan State players? I'm very curious to know that.
Let me see.
I know I did my part to keep the green side up. It would have been 6-2. I was going to be skewing Michigan State, but it would have been a little more Michigan if it weren't for Sir Anthony stealing my favorite pick in the whole draft.
I'm trying to check.
You have to love live. While Chris is counting, I'll talk about a guy. When you look at those lightning in the bottle, like March Madness guys, sometimes that's a guy you need when you go on a deep run. Someone I didn't think he would be drafted, but someone that would have been interesting for someone to take a flyer on would have been Mitch Mcgarry, just based on what he did in that 2013 NCAA tournament. I mean, it kind of sort of came out of nowhere. I mean, 13 points, 21 points, 25, 11, 10, and then he didn't do much in that national title game against Louisville. But again, when we get to this point in the draft, you're talking about the 9th guy on your roster, and that would you know, I never really considered taking him, but just someone that's interesting when you think about the exercise.
If my assessment is correct and could be wrong, I'm seeing 18 state players, 14 Michigan players. So we're pretty good. That's a pretty solid balance there. I think that's kind of what we were going for, and it makes sense considering where these programs have been since 2008. I think that the Michigan didn't pop until 2012, 2013. So I think you have some of those earlier year guys with Izzo. But yeah, I think we're pretty close to equal there in terms of overall assessment.
Yeah, I think that's a good example for the exact reasons you outlined. And look at this beautiful list he already has going.
Attaboy, Ben.
Just eyeballing this, I mean, man, I think Broome's team looking a little short. Well, I think you guys are a little small. I got to look up the heights here. I'm going to do a more in-depth analysis after the fact. I really like DK's team. That's probably my favorite team other than mine, if I'm just eyeballing this. I mean, shit, like Adrian Payne, you had a guy that was dominant in his senior year as your fourth guy. If you just look across line, you know, I guess you have to only take what we've seen from Dickinson. You can't like project what he might do this year. You have the Manny Harris pick is just hilarious. It's like Payne dominant, Manny Harris empty stats, Dickinson.
Dude, Manny Harris's stats weren't any emptier than Miles Bridges. Stop it.
Excuse me, sir.
Wow.
Much less efficient. And wait, did I miss when Manny Harris won the Big Ten? Because if you want to talk about
okay,
is there anything emptier than being
Miles
terrible?
Bridges is better, but I do think that there's a revisionist history when it comes to Miles Bridges at Michigan State. But okay, we can have that argument another time.
Also, it's funny that I'm considered the short team when I have literally the tallest guy in the entire field on my roster, and Hunter Dickinson.
you may have the tallest height average period. This is not a side. This is just me eyeballing stuff in real time. It's not just height. It's like
he's like Levert's 6'6", Dickinson's 7'1", Draymond Green's 6'7".
He's less than Castellani. So like, it's not just height. It's like, what kind of, cushion are you bringing here? I think your team gets pushed around in this scenario. Although you do have Draymond Green.
Yeah, but that's the thing. Draymond plays tall, though. He's done that in the NBA. He's what is Draymond? 6'9"?
I'm not counting Draymond in the
6'7".
It's 6'8". Draymond plays 6'11". Like just so, yeah. That's kind of almost skewed a little bit.
Yeah, I'll do a bigger. I'm insulted that Sutan's name is misspelled, but we'll address that later. There will be a significant fine. Seriously, great job by Ben throwing this together in real time.
Yeah, wow, that's awesome.
Yeah,
this will be fun to kind of dig into, and I'm curious to see what other people say about this. Just kind of interesting looking at the quality of the field that you had. We mentioned it in passing. Only 6 players in this draft made an All-American team. Trey Burke, Draymond Green, and Denzel were first team. Cassius 2-time second team. Stauskas and Bridges rounding out that list.
Wasn't Dickinson second team his freshman year too?
Yes,
was he?
He's 2 times. He's a 2-time All-American.
I think he actually was his freshman year.
I think
totally
Cash got first votes. I want to say in 19 he got some first votes. It was split between the media and the coaches or however they do it. Cash did get some first place votes his junior year, I want to say.
Which is bizarre because Dickinson was better his sophomore year. But
I thought Dickinson was like on that honorable mention list. I may have misread the chart I was looking at, but I'm pretty sure this one's accurate because this is a much simpler thing to look at. Michigan State had 3 defensive players of the year in this draft pool.
Yeah,
all on my team.
Who was the third?
Tillman, Jackson, and Travis Walton.
Yeah.
Oh, Walton was a defensive player there. I didn't know that.
In 2009. So the entire pool had 3 guys that won Conference Defensive Player of the Year. All were Michigan State Spartans, and all are on my team. It's interesting. Michigan not only had 0 in this pool, but the last guy to win Defensive Player of the Year in the conference for Michigan was Gary Grant. I don't even know who the fuck that is. In 1988, won it back-to-back years.
Wagner should have won it. That was an oversight.
I was just gonna say, I feel like you guys are a good enough program that you should have had 1 in the last 35.
I think you could have made the argument that Franz and also maybe not his last 2 years.
Who won it in the year that Wagner did? Was it Darrell Morcell from Maryland?
Yeah, no, that was nonsense.
He didn't even make a first team. That was one of the worst voting I've ever seen. They should make that public. If you can't come to some consensus on that, and you leave him off the team. Like, what a gross oversight that was.
Yeah, I don't understand. I think it wasn't more so like the leader in blocks, which I think has been like the assessment that people have made over the last decade, which is if you just block a bunch of shots, you're going to be defensive player of the year. Franz Wagner's the best defender I've ever seen in Michigan.
You're right. It was Morcell from Maryland. And man, I don't
gross.
know.
What did they finish? What did they finish in the league? They finished like 6th or 7th, and Michigan won the league the year.
No,
They had a losing. They
beat them 3 times.
Eighth. Yeah. They were 8th. They had a losing record. They were 9-11 in the Big Ten. I mean, I don't think that's alone disqualifying, but it doesn't help. If
pretty
it's
close. If this was Big Ten Player of the Year, you would not have that team for consideration. It's almost always a top 3 team in the conference that wins.
No, I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just saying I don't think that's completely disqualifying. You the best defensive player on the planet might happen to be on a shitty team. It's possible, but in the pile, like that's a bad demerit for sure.
Now I got to ask one more question though, because DK had first pick. I had second, Anthony at third. The way that we're assessing this, when you put the poll out on Twitter, are we doing a bracket where my team plays Anthony, DK's team plays yours, or are we doing a which team is the best? Because I do think that could make a difference if we're doing straight matchups.
That's actually a fair question. My intent going in was to be kind of like a who's your pick, like in Vegas, like who would be the favorite? Like who would you bet on? Like just scramble it up like blindly. But I think we should do a bracket. I think we would. I mean, do you want? Man, I don't want to do 1-4 because I think DK's team is probably better than mine. But
I mean, you can do it any way you want. I think also if you can split it up again, you can split it up any way you want. I also think it would be fun because there's gonna be internet, Anthony and me playing each other. That's Michigan versus Michigan technically. So you could break it up however you want. But if we're doing just pick wise. With DK 1, you at the 4, me at the 2, and Anthony at the 3.
We'll figure out how to determine the bracket, but I think that's a great idea. It's no surprise that the one guy that's making Lamborghini money to do the sports media stuff is coming up with the best idea of the night.
Oh, yeah, Lamborghini money. I don't even have a show right now, buddy. So
that's fine. Howard Stern got canceled like 12 times. Like,
which is that's criminal, by the way, but it's a topic for another day.
It's the business decision. I love where I work. That's I'm fucking with people.
You can say whatever you want. Whatever.
My question is, how do we find a way? Like, is there a way? Probably not, because not all these guys are in the NBA or in on a save roster. I would love to see this like simulated out. Like forget what people vote, forget what we think. Like I would love to see like some virtual Spartans and Wolverines just kind of like
bringing back the NCAA games, right? So maybe we can see if that happens.
Well, I put a pin in this and come back in 2025.
If we did a Twitch stream of us playing each other in a video game against each other, with holding the controllers and trying to put these teams together, that would be hilarious. I feel like that would be.
I just want to remind everyone out there when they're voting that in the entire pool, 3 guys won defensive player of the year in the conference, and they're all on one team, and it's mine. Just throwing that out there. So when you see Drew Neitzel out there and you think, oh, that guy can't guard a chair, just remember I got 3 good guys, 3 guys that were the best in the conference around.
Wait, did Neitzel really win Big Ten Player of the Year in 2007?
Neitzel, his junior year,
he was Big Ten player. I knew he was really good, but wow,
that's what I said earlier. I said earlier, like there was a 2-year run where he was considered one of the 3 or 4 best guys in the conference, and that year, some people didn't like when he won in real time. I can't remember this.
Dude, there's no way. Okay, I know you're right, but like that was the year Ohio State was like that's like one of the best Big Ten teams ever. How did he win over like He beat Odin. Was that the Odin year? That was Conley. Odin wasn't like dominant though. He was shooting with the wrong hand and stuff. Like I don't like he was good. I'm not saying I know he won it. I'm just surprised. Like because that Ohio State team was insanely good. That's like one of the best teams to not win a Big Ten championship. Yeah, or not win an NCAA championship. I mean.
Yeah, and one more thing that I'll say is, from a Justin perspective, flexing the defense here. I don't know how we could plug this to a Ken Pom or offensive efficiency or whatever that would be, but I think 8 of the last 9 or 9 of the last 10, something like that, NCAA champions were all top 10 Ken Pom offense. So something to think about there.
That was always your stat, even going back to Mason Broome. Man,
that's right. Yeah, I fact checked our list. I don't think he did win Player of the Year. I think he was like runner up, Neitzel. Maybe DK, you can fact.
Was that the Orlando Tucker year?
Because Neitzel was definitely first team All Big Ten. I remember that. I remember there was some controversy the year that his junior year about who should be Big Ten Player of the Year surrounding Neitzel, but I think he actually lost. I don't think he won. We'll have to check that, but he was. Well, I mean, he was on the first team. He was one of the best 5 players in the conference.
For sure.
Yeah, so I mean, he was up there. So it's an interesting breakdown with everything. Again, in this pool, you had 6 guys in the pool that were objectively one of the 10 best players in the country at their peak with the first or second team All-American. It's just the story of the rivalry. There's a lot of fucking dogs in this rivalry. There's just some good players, and that's why you have multiple Final Four banners between the two schools. I think that kind of speaks to the rivalry. I can't believe the Big Ten doesn't have a title since 2000. It's crazy,
right?
It's been a good conference. I can't believe it. But
it's been our 2 teams carrying the water for the conference for most of it, though. That's the thing, right? There really hasn't been a ton of teams. Wisconsin made that run.
Yeah, 15 Wisconsin should have had it. That 15 Wisconsin team.
They beat that Kentucky team. That team was so loaded. Kaminsky and Decker. I think was it Bronson Koenig was their point guard. Is that right?
You had Koenig, you had Decker, you had Nigel
Hayes. Hayes. They had just a really nice balanced team.
Yeah, all-time starting 5. Bo Ryan's best team by a
that Wisconsin-Kentucky game was so good. That's one of my favorite. Good. Yeah, that was one of my favorite games that I didn't really care that much who won, just as an objective fan. And it's an incredible rivalry. I'm curious to see where it goes. I was not scared at all when they hired John Beilein. I thought it was stupid. I thought his West Virginia offense was gimmicky, jack up 100 threes a game. He proved me wrong. I was a lot more scared of Juwan Howard. I'm less scared of him now. I'm not saying he's nothing, but there's
5 tournament wins in 2 years, man.
I'm not saying he sucks. I don't. It's kind of the reverse. Beilein, I can't find a Michigan State fan that says a bad word about John Beilein. We love John Beilein.
But, for the record though, what you just said, you were right. That offense was stupid. That offense was not sustainable in the Big Ten. He just adapted. On paper, that should not have worked the way it did. The fact is, much like Izzo and much like the best coaches in the country, every 3-4 years, he completely revamped his scheme, whether it be offensively or defensively, in terms of spreading the floor. Obviously, Burke made a huge difference, but his teams were not always good defensively until they brought in Yaklich. I think on paper, I looked at that higher and we're like, all right, he can get him to the tournament. He can get him to the second round. But nobody expected. This is a multi-time Final Four coach.
We'll finish here. Short answer. Next team in this rivalry to win a national championship. I think right now, Michigan's closer. I mean, just in terms of not just the current.
Wow, really? Okay.
It's not just in terms of the current roster, but the momentum of the program. You have a coach that's sort of on the come. Our coach, I don't know if he's awake. I don't know what's going on. There was no credible good program in the country that needed to hit the transfer portal as much, certainly not more than Michigan State, and no team that's done less with it. I don't know what's going on up there. There's theories out there from Odell Bredham Jr. that Izzo is deliberately sticking it to the fans that are mad at him. When the biggest super fan in the fan base is saying, I think Izzo's trying to get back at us, things aren't going well. So just based on that alone, I don't see it. Michigan, we all know college basketball could change in 6 months with 1 or 2 recruits and everything changes. But if I had to pick and my kids' lives are on the line or something, not to go too far, I'd take Michigan with a gun to the heads of my family. I would take Michigan. I like kind of their juju a little bit more. I don't know what we're doing in East Lansing, but we'll kind of do the draft order in reverse. Anthony, who gets to the finish line, even if it's in 50 years? Who's next?
There's something that tells me there is one magical run left in Tom Izzo. I think that's there somewhere, just because the universe works in mysterious yet sometimes predictable ways. A lot of work to do with that roster, obviously, but the way I feel it's Michigan right now, just because I think they're recruiting a little bit better. There's a willingness to hit the transfer portal. I think there's a shot even this offseason still that they could get like a Pete Nance or an Emmanuel Acott or someone of that ilk to add to the roster, and maybe things get interesting next season. they've done better getting like the 5-star one and done guys, but similar to Michigan State as of late, have just had trouble landing that difference maker. Like though the best 2 recruits of the last 15 years, or probably even longer for Michigan basketball, are probably either not going to get drafted or be parked somewhere in the G League. So I lean Michigan just because I think that they're, there's a lot of brand power there on the recruiting trail. I think that Juwan Howard, as long as he's got a staff of Phil Martelli and Saudi Washington and recruiting moderately well, like they have, Dickinson so far is his biggest, the biggest piece of the puzzle. We'll see how many years he has left in him, but I lean Howard. But given the fact that it's been, now it's 22 years since the Big Ten has won a national title, the realist in me says that it's probably going to be a wash, and that neither of these teams will in the near or the long-term future. But we'll see. If we're looking at the team that's maybe better equipped to do that right now, I think it's Michigan. But I still, there is somewhere before it's all said and done, I do think that Izzo will have one more shot at this.
I hope so, because Oakland University is hitting the portal harder than we are. Chris, to you. Like literally, by the way, literally. But go ahead, Chris. Sorry.
It's a tough one, man. I think Final Four Michigan State has a better chance, but ceiling wise, I think as of 2 years ago, Juwan Howard had a team capable of winning a national championship. And I think they got popped and choked in the Elite Eight, but I think that roster wise, that team had it.
If Livers doesn't get injured, that's a different team. It's completely different.
Exactly. And yeah, look, last year, despite the Sweet 16 appearance, disappointing. He salvaged it in the tournament, but it's not like Juwan's all of a sudden fallen off on the recruiting trail. So I think if we're talking natty, I'm still going Michigan for that, but I'm not. I'll always believe Izzo has another Final Four run left in him. That's my pick right now.
This is a great question. I'm going to pose a couple questions back to you guys and just try to get your feel on it one way or the other. I'll say this. Howard has done a nice job on the recruiting trail. There's no doubt of that. But the actual fruit that it's yielded hasn't exactly worked out yet. And I think that he's still trying to figure out how to build the roster construction. I think his first season, he had some leftover pieces, and that obviously wasn't a great season. They had a great year too. To me, I get that they made a Sweet 16, but for me, that really doesn't erase what occurred during the course of the season. Yep. I think that they probably had a top maybe 2 talented team in the Big Ten. They finished 8th.
Yeah.
Like that was kind of a disappointing year. You look at the way that the roster's constructed this year. They went out and got Llewellyn, I know, from Princeton, but that's still maybe a bit of a shaky proposition. What are you getting out of him? Is he Devontae Jones or is he Mike Smith? I'm not sure what you're going to get there. You've had some carryover, and I think Dickinson covers up a lot of the warts. I think Jet Howard is going to be a stud, but the 2 from 4 and even maybe the 1 through 4 positions, that's shaky. Who's your starting 2 right now? Kobe Buffkin? You're going to land Joey Baker, who hasn't really played. He's coming off a hip surgery. Jet Howard's probably your 3. I like Terrence Williams, but is he like an all-conference type guy? No. So I think there's a lot of question marks for the roster next year. I think that this is probably maybe the worst team Dickinson has played with, and it's kind of progressively kind of gone that way a little bit for him. And yes, it matters to hit on some of these recruits and to have these top 10 classes. He needs to develop the guys that he has. There's been a bit of roster turnover with it. He continues to have to pluck point guards, and it hasn't always 100% worked out. So I think that the formula and the way that he's doing it, I don't know if he's quite 100% got it. There's got to be a mix of guys you've developed, guys that you get in the transfer, and guys you hit that are one and dones, and he hasn't been able to do that yet. We'll see kind of how it goes. I will say this for Michigan State. This has been a disappointing offseason. I think we'll all agree with that. I like the talent on the roster, but if they would have bolstered it in a couple spots, we would have been in much better shape and feeling much better about it. The way that 2023 is going, they've hit the recruiting trail extremely hard. If they land a class of Jeremy Fears, Xavier Booker, and Devin Royal, which is not completely a pie in the sky, it's a potential possibility with the guard play that they bring back. And if you can maybe retain a guy like Malik Hall on the wing, for a 5th season, you get a guy to come back. To me, next year's Michigan State roster could potentially be contender worthy. I think Xavier Booker is that good, and he kind of fills in a need that's not otherwise on the roster with what they have. So it's interesting to see how it goes. I think a lot of it depends for Izzo's next, couple of years that he has, is how does he hit the next two classes? Because we've seen his reluctance to hit the portal. If he doesn't hit the high school kids that he's recruiting, I just think this is maybe one of the biggest off seasons that the program has really ever dealt with. And the way that this recruiting class goes is really going to dictate whether Michigan State's capable of getting back to a Final Four and beyond. And that's kind of where I leave it. So I would lean more towards Michigan. But again, is Howard going to stick it through? I think Jet Howard, his younger son, is probably a 2 and done at best. Jace will basically be graduated in 2 years. He's going to have the NBA calling. At what point does the money come into play and both his kids are there? And maybe he has an opportunity to coach him at the next level at Jet or something. So I just think that it's no guarantee that Howard's here for the next 10 years. So either way you look at it, I think it's very interesting time to be part of both programs for sure.
Yeah.
That real quick, that's why David is the best, because we were all like, I don't know, fuck it, maybe Michigan. And Dave gives this whole soliloquy, bringing up recruits and breaking down the rosters, the transfer portal. Like that's why what you do, you are better at what you do than almost anybody who covers. Not almost, than anybody who covers.
He's the best.
Yeah, it just.
Thank you very much for saying that, guys. Appreciate that.
We love you. We love you, man.
For the record, DK could have made up the names of those Michigan State recruits, and I would have no idea.
Right,
that's why I talked to him and Justin Tind. Like those guys actually know this shit. I was cool.
If Jet's last name wasn't Howard, if you would have said Jet Smith, I'd been like, yeah, this guy might be all right. Yeah.
Well, can we talk about the Jet? This is the biggest problem in this state and the rivalry in general. The nepotism. You got guys like Jet Howard and Steven Izzo that have no business being on a team. Jet Howard and Steven Izzo, they're one and the same, right?
You know what? Steven Izzo's a cult. Not going to knock him. Love Steven. But yes, it is a different comparison.
The fact that Steven Izzo didn't.
That is the one who's probably going to play pro in a year or two. So you got to get him right if you're going to be throwing shade. Jet Howard definitely has a role on the team next year. He might end up being the second leading scorer potentially. So
I thought the dripping sarcasm was obvious enough, but apparently not. I got to work on it. But it was fun. So just to clarify, I think we had a clean sweep that we all picked Michigan for that. I mean, I know there was some kind of like,
I'm very on edge, but gun to my head, I probably lean Michigan. Part of that, there was a favoritism element to that, obviously. But yeah,
this is actually a good thing, because whenever everyone thinks Izzo's done, that's when they're like, oh, here comes the Final Four that nobody.
I know, that's what scares me. That's what
I'm saying. Like there's one more fuck you run to the Final Four in him, and then once you get there,
this guy repeatedly.
That's what worries me about next year's team, is we're gonna have a 2019 run where it's 3-0 against Michigan, heartbreak against a good Michigan team. Yeah, I know.
I mean, the sky was falling in like 03, 06, 11, 15,
18, and
now.
19. Yeah.
The sky has been falling 6 times, and it's like every third year he's back.
Real quick, I have 2 quick points to make, and I know we're running long, but one of them is a sports thing, and one of them is unrelated. If next year's team is a first weekend team, is that the point where you say the era of dominance is done?
That's a great question.
That's 3
and again, to me, that just completely. Next year can be a building block for the next season with what is in play if he lands Xavier Booker and Devin Royal on top of Jeremy Freed. I think that the class really would dictate my thing. If he falls through and he lands short on one or both of those guys, it really would skew my view of this season. But I think that there's guys that will be placed in roles because there's not so many people behind them that are going to develop this year. And if it can push towards a certain way, I think that they could really build this base of the team and then insert some high level talent, and it looks much sexier next year. So I would have to reserve my answer to that to see how the rest of the summer goes.
That's very fair. Justin, what do you?
I would agree. I mean, it depends what the opening weekend exit looks like. Like if they have multiple commitments and they have a top 10 class coming in and they lose by a bucket in the second game, but they got a good infrastructure there. They have 2 or 3 guys that are contributing at a high level and 2 or 3 more on the way. That's that's different. You can have the same result on paper, but have a totally different outlook and interpretation of it. I mean, I know the 2008 team did make it to the second weekend before getting boat raced by Memphis in 08, but it's a similar thing where it's like, it looked like we were the worst team in the country in that Sweet 16 game against Memphis. But like, I remember, because I was a student there at the time, everybody in my circle, fellow students, were like, we're good. Like, this Kalen Lucas kid is coming back. He's going to be he was already good as a freshman. Yeah. Like, we have a solid recruiting class coming in. Like, Sutan was really solid as a junior, was going to be a year older. Rahman was going to be a senior, was a very good junior. So like, even though we got embarrassed and that team had no chance to make a Final Four, in my opinion, we were a sleeper pick for some. I never was on that train. Everyone felt good about it. So DK's right. Like, we could have another opening weekend flop, but it could be interpreted completely differently, and it's going to be based on what's set up and what's committed for the next year. Look, Justin Tin calls me a cynical asshole. I'm tired of seeing ESPN's top 100 and the top 25 guys. I see 2 guys going to DePaul, 1 guy going to Loyola, one guy going to Cincinnati, 3 guys going to Penny Hardaway, and it's no Michigan State to be found. I got to scroll down to Jackson Kohler in like the 50s. I think that guy's going to be really good. But, like, you're not going to win a national title with that. You're just not. You're just not. Like, they have to get somebody at that high end, and they just don't. They did in the past, the last couple of years. They just haven't. I mean, you want to throw Christie in there? Okay. Christie was never, to me, that dog. He was a 12th, 14th, 15th guy. I want a stud here, and I don't see that. We're not getting the development side. Rocket Watts is on his 7th team since he came to Michigan State a couple years ago. I hate where they're at right now, but I acknowledge we have buried this coach 6 times.
Yeah.
We counted him out like 6 times in 25. Every 3rd or 4th year, we're like, this guy's done. And then he's proven us wrong every time. So you have that built-in benefit of the doubt, but I have no basis other than blind faith because there's nothing to base it on. This has been the worst offseason in my lifetime as a Michigan State basketball fan. I can't think of a worse one in terms of just roster construction. They had other stuff, Izzo flirting with Cleveland and stuff, other stuff going on in the program. I'm not talking about off-court stuff, but just in terms of roster, it's just been a disaster.
Yeah. I will say another down season will turn up a bit of the clamor from the fan base because I think we're getting pretty sick of the second weekend exits. And for him to double down on the stubbornness, you love it, but you also, if there's an injury and it gets a little thin in spots, like it's either going to go very well this season or a couple people are going to get injured. It's going to go very poor. Like I don't see there really being an in between. I really don't this season. I think it's either going to go super well or it's going to be a little bit of a disaster and there's going to be some more clamor from the fan base.
That was going to be my next question was that are we getting to a point with your guys' fan base where there's a little bit of fear that this might be heading towards like a Mark D'Antonio-esque type of ending where it's like, we acknowledge that you're the best coach in program history, but it might just be time.
I mean,
and the thing is he'll have as much time as he can have, right? Like he's going to retire on his own terms. And that is a little bit scary, slightly.
Yeah. I mean, I've gone on record where I didn't even feel this way about D'Antonio with Izzo. He can drive the program into the ground. I'll be sad about it, but I'll never like hate him.
His peaks were, and D'Antonio was amazing, but the longevity with Izzo is not comparable to what D'Antonio did. Yeah.
My license plate is TM Izzo, for Christ's sake. So you're literally. I mean, you're not talking to like.
It's 25 years versus a 5-year run. Like
You might as well have a tattoo, Brandon, on your bicep.
Yeah, seriously, and and commission paintings on the wall, and whatever. It's just I'm in that boat where like I'm never gonna be on here like calling them names, but I can comment on the offseason. Like only Tony Dombrowski could sell this offseason as being anything better than a complete, not disappointing. Like disappointing is like we needed 4 guys and we got 3, or we needed a point guard and a big and we got 1.
Is he a Michigan State guy?
He is, yeah. Tony likes Michigan State. I mean, not the way
It's
he likes the
unfortunate.
Tigers, but I mean,
Yeah.
Tigers,
That'll be a good topic of conversation when you have him on your show next year.
yeah, that'll be. What are we going to talk about? Like, what's the conversation after like the clapping and the plagiarizing?
I'm not. You know what? I'm not.
I don't even need you on the show. I'll just have Tony. Tony will just do what he always does. Do a much worse version of what you do.
Tony is a nice guy. Tony is a nice kid.
I'm sure he's a great guy, but I'm not a big fan of plagiarism and.
Come on, yeah.
So, but at least
I didn't. But okay,
There's
before
5 minutes left in this finals game. It's somewhat close. It's like a 10-point game or so.
All right.
Real quick. Let me make one more point.
Up,
I'm sorry, Justin. I don't hate to do this because it's for a good cause. Like my birthday is in 40 minutes. I don't give a shit. I don't really care about my birthday. What I want, it's another reminder that I'm getting fucking old and cynical and single. I don't care. But what I want, real quick, lastly, all week I've been doing a charity shout out, the Freddie the Pizza Man Foundation. Please, if you can donate sensory rooms all across the state of Michigan. That's my last thing. And really. Justin, we met each other 5 years ago, and the first time we met, you paid for my gas money when I hung out at your studio for the first time. And you talk about changes. A whole lot has moved, a whole lot has changed professionally and personally. So birthdays do not mean as much to me anymore. What means a lot to me is just making sure that we can put people in a position to be happy and succeed. So if you can donate what you can, I don't mean to go off on a soliloquy here because it is late at night, but please, whatever you can donate, please do it. And I'll continue to promote it tomorrow. That'll be it. I'm going to shut the hell up now because we've been going on for a long time.
Yeah. Freddie's fantastic friend of mine, friend of the show. And I'm a big supporter of his charity as well. So you can't find a better one in the area. Thank you guys. I think this is going to be interesting. Hopefully we win almost 2 hours exactly. So that'll be, I think people might be watching it like in spurts, but this was fun. I'm excited to kind of take a step back and look at everything and see where it lands and where we land. On paper right now, I like DK, but I might totally change my mind. It'll be fun to flesh out. We'll talk about the seeding. We'll work that out. We'll get that done. Everyone watching, thank you. For those of you that watch this live, kudos to you for going to an NBA Finals game. This was a blast, and hopefully we can fill the offseason other than the Tigers with more fun stuff like this. I'm looking forward to it. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, guys.